Hey guys, in today's video, I bring you a chilling story. Let's meet Cassia Whitlow, an independent woman who died for 8 minutes and had a shocking near-death experience. She was sucked into a terrifying void until Jesus appeared and revealed a truth about being gay that she never imagined. What he said changed your entire life. So before we start, leave your like, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any content like this, and activate the bell to receive all notifications. Now, get ready for this intense and transformative journey. My name is Cassia Whitlow, and this is the story of how I died. It was not a great tragedy. There was no car accident, shooting, or terminal illness. My death came in the most ridiculous way possible, falling down a ladder while changing a light bulb. If someone told me it would be like this, I would laugh. After all, I have always been independent. I grew up believing that depending on someone was a fatal mistake. My mother taught me this early on, right after my father abandoned us. Never trust any man, Cassia. In the end, they always leave. Those words stuck with me. I carried them like a shield. I never needed anyone. I did everything alone. Until that night. It was late. The porch light bulb burned out, and instead of waiting until the next day, I decided to change it myself. I took the ladder, climbed a few steps, and held the new bulb. Leaning one foot on the top step, I stretched my arm. That's when everything went wrong. I felt the stairs tremble beneath my feet. My heart raced. In an instant, frozen in time, I realized that I would fall. I tried to hold on to the door frame, but it was useless. The world spun around me. The weight of my body pulled me back. The lamp slipped out of my hand and shattered on the floor before me. And then, impact. There was no immediate pain, just a dry noise. The skull hitting the wood of the floor. A shock ran through my body, as if something inside me had ruptured. Then, silence. I blinked, trying to move. My vision was blurry, ears ringing. I wanted to get up, but my body wouldn't respond. A strange numbness began to spread through me. That's when I noticed something strange. I could still see my body, but from the wrong angle, as if you were out of it. A wave of panic hit me. I wanted to take a deep breath, but there was no air. Then, I heard a distant sound, someone knocking on the door. Cassia, are you there? He was my neighbor, Noah Calloway. His voice sounded worried. Then heavy footsteps echoed on the balcony. He opened the door. The shock on his face hit me like a punch. He saw me lying on the floor, but no saw me, because I was outside my body. Noah Calloway froze when he saw me on the floor. He hesitated for a moment, then hurried over, kneeling beside me. Cassia, can you hear me? I tried to respond, I tried to scream, move anything, but nothing happened. It was like my voice was trapped inside me. My body remained motionless on the floor, but you was standing next to him, watching everything with a mixture of dread and disbelief. My heart raced, or rather, he no longer beats. What was happening? Was I dreaming? Delirious? Noah picked up his cell phone and dialed with shaking hands. There's a woman unconscious. She fell. I think she hit her head. She's not breathing. Am I not breathing? My stomach turned. The attendant's voice on the line was low and steady. Noah tried to remain calm, but the tension on his face was evident. As he spoke, my attention was drawn to something strange. My body, he looked wrong, pale, motionless, an empty hull. There was something missing in him, something I somehow knew was with me now. Time seemed to slip, as if I were trapped between two worlds. I saw Noah touching my wrist, trying to feel my pulse. He pressed his fingers against my neck, eyes wide with fear. Please, Cassia, stay with me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him that I was there, right next to him, but he couldn't hear me. The ambulance arrived minutes later. Paramedics rushed into the house, carrying a stretcher. I followed them, or rather, I was pulled. My body floated behind them as if I wasn't walking but was being carried by an invisible current. 2 rescuers began to examine my body. Weak pulse. Let's take her right away. The sight was surreal. I was there, watching my own body being carried as if it were a lifeless object. Then something even more disturbing happened. An invisible force pulled me up. I didn't walk. There was no wind or sound. Simply I was sucked up, passing through the roof of the house, through the starry sky, going higher and higher. Panic took over me. Something was terribly wrong. And then everything was dark. Emptiness awaited me. The darkness was absolute. There was no ground beneath my feet, no sky above my head. There was no sound, no wind, no sign of life, just the nothing. Fear took over me. I tried to breathe, but there was no air. I tried to move my hands, but there was no body. It was as if I were just consciousness, a loose thought, floating in the void. And then, the voices started. At first they were indistinct whispers, low, almost imperceptible, as if someone was speaking far away. But little by little, they became clearer. She always rejected the truth. The phrase echoed around me, cutting like a blade. She thought she knew everything. Another voice, different from the first, serious, bitter. She hides behind her own strength. But now, there's nowhere to run. My heart, or whatever was left of me, sank. They were talking from me. The panic increased. Who were they? Where was I? I tried to speak. I wanted to scream that this was a mistake, that I shouldn't be there, but there was no voice. My thought was a scream trapped in the absolute silence. Then, a sound ripped through the darkness. It was a whisper, different from the others. Cold, harsh. Cassia Whitlow, you built your walls, but now, they have collapsed. The voice did not come from a specific place. It seemed to be inside me. I wanted to run away, but there was nowhere to run. The feeling of extreme loneliness hit me like an overwhelming wave. A despair I had never experienced before came over me. I was always strong. I always trusted only in myself. But there, in the middle of nowhere, my strength didn't mean absolutely nothing. For the first time in my life, I felt real dread. Suddenly, I was pulled. I didn't see what happened. In an instant, he was in the void. The next thing, I was ripped out of there as if something was pulling me by an invisible thread. And then, I found myself back in the hospital. It was there, floating above my body, watching the doctors trying to revive me. That's when I heard the doctor say the words that would change everything. Time of death, 11:47 p.m. They were declaring me dead, and me was still there. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My body lay pale and still on the emergency room table as doctors and nurses worked frantically around me. I heard the hurried commands, the intermittent beeping of devices, the muffled sound of hurried footsteps on the cold floor. But I wasn't there. Not the way it should be. I was above the scene, floating in the air like a weightless shadow, observing everything from an impossible perspective. My mind screamed that it didn't make sense. How could I be seeing my own body down there? How could I hear the doctors discussing my condition if I was supposedly dead? Then, the blue-coated doctor took off her gloves with a heavy sigh. She looked at the clock on the wall and announced, "Time of death, 11:47 p.m." It was like being punched in the stomach. The phrase hammered inside me. Was I dead? Time seemed to drag by, distorted by the confusion and fear that overwhelmed me. I watched as one of the nurses covered my body with a white sheet, and I felt a wave of terror wash over me. This couldn't be happening. I tried desperately to interact with the world around me. I moved my hands, tried to touch one of the doctors, hold the nearest nurse's arm, but my hand passed through her body as if I were nothing more than a ghost. Does anyone hear me? My voice didn't come out. I was there. I existed, but no one could see me. Despair was growing inside me like a fire out of control. I couldn't accept that. I wasn't ready to die. Then, I was taken out of the hospital. Without warning, an invisible force violently pulled me back, as if an invisible chain was pulling me out of that place. My spiritual body was flung through space, and everything around me became an indistinct blur. The hospital lights disappeared. The sound of the monitors dissolved into nothingness. The floor disappeared. And in the blink of an eye, I was back at empty. But this time, there were no more voices. Just one terrifying silence, and a darkness so deep that it seemed to want to swallow me. That's when I saw something in the distance. In the middle of that absolute pitch black, a light as small as a grain of sand flashed on the horizon. It was almost insignificant, but it was the only thing there. And, without understanding why, I was attracted to her. The small light on the horizon seemed distant, fragile, almost non-existent in the face of the expanse of darkness around me. But for some reason, I couldn't take my eyes off her. It was like a spark of hope in the midst of absolute emptiness. And then, she started to grow. At first, I thought it was an illusion, but it wasn't. The light expanded, slowly at first, then more strongly, until I began to feel her heat. It was an indescribable sensation, unlike anything I had ever experienced. It wasn't just physical heat. It was a warmth that touched my soul. The darkness around me began to dissolve, receding like a shadow fleeing the dawn. The light, now much larger, not only illuminated the space around me, but filled me. Then I noticed something that made my chest tighten. The light, it wasn't just light. She was somebody. I couldn't explain how, but you knew. That presence was not just any beam of energy, nor a creation of my mind. She was aware. She knew me, and me too recognized her. Without anyone having to tell me, without a single word being spoken, I understood exactly who was there. Era Jesus. The revelation hit me like a wave. My heart, or what was left of it, sank. All my life, I had rejected this idea. I didn't believe in heavenly visions. I made fun of people who said they had spiritual experiences. I considered myself practical, logical, down to earth. But now, before him, I couldn't deny. The light grew even more, until all fear disappeared. And then, without me needing to say anything, without him needing to move his lips, Jesus spoke to me. His voice was not a sound. It wasn't something I heard with my ears. It was something that echoed inside me. Cassia, why are you so afraid? I trembled. My instinct was to deny it, to say that I wasn't afraid of anything. But before him, before the absolute truth, I could no longer hide. I was always afraid. Fear of depending on others. Fear of being weak. Fear of being abandoned. And now, there, in front of the only presence that I saw everything inside me, I couldn't run away anymore. Jesus' words enveloped me like waves of love. There was no condemnation. There was no anger. Just true. And then, he did something I could never have predicted. He extended his hand. Come, there's something I want to show you. My chest tightened. I knew that if I accepted, nothing would be like before. But something inside me whispered that I had no choice. Then, trembling but unable to retreat, I took your hand. The moment I did, I was swallowed by the light. And suddenly, I was no longer in the void. The light enveloped me completely. There was no more darkness, fear, or confusion. It was as if every part of my being was being filled with a sense of absolute peace, something I had never experienced before. But the peace was not empty. She was alive. Jesus was there, in front of me. His gaze penetrated beyond the surface as if he could see every thought, every memory, every hidden wound inside me. And even so, he didn't look away. I've never felt so exposed. But at the same time, I've never felt so loved. Then, he showed me my life. It was like watching a movie, but without a screen, without limits. The images appeared around me and within me, as if I were seeing them, reliving. I saw my childhood, me, little, watching through the window while my mother cried alone, my father packing his bags and leaving without looking back. I saw the fury on my mother's face as she pulled me close and whispered through her teeth, "Never trust any man, Cassia. In the end, they always leave." Those words shaped me. I saw all the choices I made, all the barriers I erected. I saw the moments when someone tried to get closer and I backed away for fear of getting hurt. I have always prided myself on being strong, to be independent, but faced with the truth, I realized what it really was. A scared woman, locked inside a castle with walls that I built myself. My chest hurt as I watched my life unravel, but what came next was even worse. Jesus showed me my father. He was old, tired, sitting alone in a chair, holding a photo of me when I was still a child. His face was marked by time, but what hit me most was the repentance printed in your eyes. He cried. A sob escaped me. I didn't want to see that. I didn't want to believe that this man could feel something other than selfishness. But the truth was there, in front of me. He also suffered. The voice of Jesus sounded inside me. I shook my head, trying to shake the vision away. He abandoned me. He destroyed my mother. He left us alone. Jesus did not refute my arguments. He just looked at me with an expression of infinite patience. "You need to forgive him, Cassia." The words fell on me like a stone. I didn't want forgive him. Not after all. My chest was burning. An internal war was exploding inside me. And Jesus remained there, just waiting that I accept the truth. But I didn't know if I could do it. The silence between us seemed eternal. The light around me no longer comforted me like it used to. Now she illuminated things I didn't want to see. I still saw my father. The man who destroyed my family. The man who made me believe that I could never trust anyone but myself. He was there, old, alone, holding that photo, as if he were trapped in the past. He suffered too. Cassia. Jesus' words echoed within me once again. My throat tightened. My first instinct was to resist. How could I forgive? How can we simply forget years of abandonment, emptiness, distrust? But I knew he wasn't asking me to forget. He was asking me free my heart. I don't know how to do this. My voice finally came out. It wasn't an excuse. It was the purest truth. Jesus approached. I saw no judgment in his eyes, only understanding. He didn't need to say anything else. You knew. The pain I carried wasn't just about my father. It was about all. It was about my mother, who was consumed by resentment. It was about my hardened view of the world, about the walls I put up to protect myself from anything that looked like vulnerability. It was about fear. And then, Jesus gave me a choice. You can go back and continue as you always lived, or you can trust me. The weight of the words fell on me like a rock. He wasn't forcing me to do anything. He wouldn't force me to forgive. The choice was mine. I wanted to refuse. I wanted to say that I was fine the way I was, that I was strong, that I didn't need to change anything. But there, before him, I couldn't lie to myself anymore. My life was incomplete. My heart was hardened, and for the first time, I saw it with absolute clarity. A tear ran down my face. I choose you. The moment I said that, everything changed. It was as if an invisible weight, if it broke inside me. Something I didn't even know I'd been carrying for years broke apart. And then, without warning, the light began to disappear. I felt something pulling me, strong, uncontrollable. Jesus was still looking at me, but now he was getting further and further away. My chest tightened. No, I don't want to leave, but it was too late. The force dragged me brutally, and I was sucked back into my body. The pain hit me like an explosion. It was like being ripped from a place of peace and thrown back into something solid, heavy, suffocating. My chest burned. My lungs felt like they were on fire. I tried to open my eyes, but my eyelids felt heavy. The first sound I heard was a deafening beep. Then voices, screams. She's back. My God, she's back. What was happening? My body felt like dead weight, every cell throbbing like it was being burned alive. I coughed. Air invaded my lungs in a way that felt like the first breath of my life. My chest rose and fell uncontrollably, as if desperate to make up for lost time. Little by little, my vision began to clear. I saw surprised faces around me. Nurses, doctors, all paralyzed, as if they had seen a miracle. A woman approached me. Her eyes were still wide with shock. His fingers squeezed my wrist, as if to make sure I was really there. Cassia, can you hear me? My throat felt dry, and every word I tried to form seemed impossible. The doctor turned to one of the nurses. She had been dead for 8 minutes. This doesn't make sense. The sentence seemed to shatter something inside me. I remembered. I died. I saw my own body in the hospital. I heard when they declared me dead. I've been in the void. I saw Jesus. My mind was spinning. I knew it had been real, but how could I explain this? How could I put into words something that even I couldn't completely understand? A sob escaped my mouth, and tears began to stream down my face. Not because I was scared, but because something inside me had changed forever. But then came the second shock. When I tried to speak, my voice was weak but clear. I need to call my dad. It was only then that I realized that something I never thought possible, it had just happened. I wanted to forgive him. The words that came out of my mouth scared me as much as they scared the doctors around me. I needed to call my dad. For years, I buried any feelings related to him. I turned him into a ghost, into a shadow from the past that didn't deserve space in my life. Every time someone mentioned the word father, I shut down, I hardened, I let the resentment speak for me. But now, something was different. I wanted to forgive him, and that terrified me. What would happen if I picked up the phone and called him? What would it be like to hear your voice after so long? Would he answer me? Did he still think about me? My chest felt tight, but it wasn't from fear of rejection. It was because I knew I needed to do this. The doctor noticed my expression and spoke in a calm tone. You went through a traumatic experience, Cassia. It may be confusing. Your body is still recovering. Maybe you should rest before trying anything emotionally intense. I shook my head. No, I need to do this now. The nurse hesitated for a moment, But seeing the determination on my face, she pulled out a phone and handed it to me. My hands were still shaking when I dialed the number. I didn't know if he was still the same. I didn't even know if he would answer, but I did it anyway. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th ring, a familiar, husky voice answered. "Hello?" My heart seemed to stop. It was him. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. I had passed years rehearsing hate speeches, speeches where I would say everything he made me suffer, everything he destroyed. But now, those words no longer existed inside me. The silence was broken when he spoke again, hesitantly, almost as if he were dreaming. "Cassia?" Hearing my name come out of his mouth after so long made my eyes fill with tears. I swallowed hard, and then the words came out effortlessly. "I forgive you." On the other side of the line, his cry came immediately. A sincere, deep cry, the kind of sound I never imagined hearing from him. "Cassia, I'm so sorry. My God, I miss you so much." I closed my eyes, feeling an indescribable peace envelop me. At that moment, something inside me broke forever. It wasn't about him anymore. It was about I finally be free. After that call, something changed inside me. It was as if an invisible weight had been lifted from my shoulders. For years I carried an all-consuming grudge, an anger that shaped who I was, that hardened my heart and defined my beliefs. But now, this anger no longer existed. I felt live, as if he could truly breathe for the first time. The following days were a blur of tests, medical reevaluations, and looks of disbelief. Doctors were trying to find an explanation for what happened to me. They talked about residual brain activity, about possible post-trauma hallucinations, but I knew the truth. I had seen Jesus, and he had transformed me, but explaining this to others was impossible. When I tried to tell the doctor what I experienced, she just listened to me with a professional smile and said something about near-death experiences being common in patients who have experienced intense trauma. When I tried to talk to Noah, the neighbor who found me, he was uncomfortable, trying to comfort me without really believing me. That's when I realized something. I didn't need anyone's validation. The experience was real, more real than anything I've ever experienced in this world. And now, I needed to figure out what to do with it. When I was released from the hospital, I came home and everything seemed different. The same walls, the same furniture, the same habits as always. But it wasn't the same. I picked up the Bible that my mother always had, tucked away in the back of her drawer, one that I never bothered to open, and as I flipped through the pages, my eyes fell on a verse that seemed to have been placed there for me. "And you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." John 8:32. Those words burned inside my chest. The truth set me free. Jesus set me free. And now, I wanted others to know this too. It wasn't about religion. It wasn't about following rules or traditions. It was about something much bigger. It was about love, about forgiveness, about the real freedom that only God can give. My life was never the same again. What once defined me no longer defined me. What I once believed no longer made sense. For once, I didn't need prove anything to anyone. You was free. And if you're reading this right now, and you feel like you carry something inside of you that holds you back, know that you can be free too. Just choose. Just trust. Just surrender. Jesus is waiting for you too. If you like this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.